Hey, Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be talking about balance, the art of getting your mix to fit together well via balance. So, I have this terrible song, and it's been not mixed at all. So yeah, we're going to mix it because there's a drum set in there, believe it or not, or a little drum loop at least, that's going, and you can't hear it at all. And it's in this pattern. And then I wrote the melody in a separate pattern. We have an art, a bass line, and a melody. And I've just engineered this little example to get us going in the realm of mixing. So balance is the relationship and level between different mix elements. So for example, this kick drum is a mix element against this sub bass, which is another mix element. So as we are doing things, we want to find an optimal relationship. Now, this relationship can be moving. So instead of, I'll be explaining it as I go because I think it'll just be a lot easier to follow along. And then we'll look at an example in a mix in another video. So first, what we're going to do is we are going to select by just simply clicking and dragging and then holding down shift to select more channels. We're going to select the channels that are making audio. And in this case, it might be audio clips if you have imported stems. And we're going to go to our mixer, and we're going to go to our next open spot on our mixer. I have it already configured in my template, but I'm going to work off of just the basic stuff. So I'm going to assume we're like out here. You're going to hit Control-Shift-L, and bang, there is our stuff. So if we play it, we can see all the stuff coming in. And what we're going to do now is we're going to mix it. Now, we can mix in, there's a couple different ways about going about this. So the first thing is we have these here faders. These here faders in FL Studio, I treat as stagnant. They do not move. Once they set them, they are to remain where they are. I prefer to automate volume levels with things inside of FL. So if you open up FL and go to this cog, or open up FL, if you open up a channel, there'll be this little wrench icon. You click it, and then there'll be a volume that you can use, specifically made to be automated. You middle mouse click or alt click to reset a value. And then you can also automate these, and they will let you automate the volume while you're moving in here without having to touch these. So sometimes my stuff will be at Unity and it looks like it's not mixed, but actually it has been mixed because I have done the volume here. Balance is your first line of defense in a mix. It's the first thing you do. And I'm going to treat it as if, so we've got our song, right? And maybe we did do a little bit of mixing while we were going, but now we're going to seriously consider doing a mix down. So we're going to select our channels by holding Control, click and drag, and just boom. They're all now silent. If we play it, there should be nothing. Oh, we forgot to send something to the mix. That's why you check it. And we're going to go ahead and send that now. And organization is a whole another topic, but I'm going to name this kick. I'm going to name this one short hat. I'm going to name this one open hat. I'm going to name this one the clap because there's no point. It's much more efficient names. And then this is the ARP. And this is the melody. Or we're going to call it the lead in this case. Okay, so this is what we have going, right? And if we play it, nothing's coming through. We don't see any signal, so we're good to go. All right, so now that we have this going, what we're going to do is there's a couple different ideas about balance. And there was a couple mixes that I did where I was only allowed to use balance. And that is, first, we muted everything like so. You may have been mixing as you went. Maybe you have something you like, so you're going to work off of that. And you're going to just objectively look at it from there. But again, I way prefer this method. I'm also going to check my Fruity limiter and just make sure it's limiting properly. So if your gain's been boosted, turn that down because that's a boost in volume. We don't want that boost in volume. It's going to change the way we perceive the mix, and it will also color our mix if anything ever hits the wall. So we're just going to make sure that that's been turned down. Next, we're going to select what we feel like is the most important part of this mix. And in this case, we're just going to make sure we have a killer kick drum. Now, we're only going to be dealing with balance, so the fader movements, and it's an art. One trick is right now it's going to be in stereo, right? Let's mix it in mono first and then open it up in stereo. It's a common trick done where you get all your levels relatively set in mono, and then you move it to stereo, and it will sound really great. So to do that, we're going to add a Maximus to our signal chain, and oop, it popped up over there. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this here button on the master tab. We're going to go to 100% merged. So now our mix will guaranteed be in mono just in case. And then after we've mixed it in mono, Then we're going to open it up to stereo. This, because stereo has a lot more room in it. So if you can get it jamming in mono, you're going to be good. So when I'm setting levels, this is a common thing I'll do, or oftentimes I'll skip this, but I do it occasionally because it is good exercise and it does work. So we're going to go here. We're going to play our mix, and I'm going to start bringing up the kick. Oh, another thing, we need a meter, right, to be judging what we're going to be doing. Not necessarily because we don't trust our ears, but just because we don't want to be peaking in values we don't like. And there's a detached option. You'll often see me open up this menu in like a split second, just hit D, and that automatically selects detached. Now I'm gonna put it up here because my face is down there, and you can see that just fine. I'll put it just above my face. Okay. So here we've got this, right? And we're gonna start bringing up the kick. And now that's all we're dealing with is levels. So we're gonna get our kick, and let's aim for like -6. So this is actually a pretty soft kick. So we're just going to call that good right there. All right, now let's bring up our, what is our next most important thing? Let's bring up the short hat. Let's get our whole drum set going. That sounds good. Something to note is that things, even though they might be low here, they do sum together, and that's going to make this be all these together are obviously going to be louder than what the individual strips are going to show us. Now, if your volume's not loud enough, I recommend you just reach over and turn it up a little bit. Now let's bring in we have the lead, the sub bass, and the ARP. They occupy different areas of the spectrum. The ARP blends with the lead a little bit. So we're going to bring up the ARP some. Just so you know, Harmor is always like this. Harmor is really loud. So in a way, it's a good thing because then it gives us a lot of room to mess with. But at the same time, your faders are going to be down here a lot of the time with Harmor. Now we have our kick and our sub bass fine, and we'll talk about ways we could solve this in other videos. But right now, this sounds pretty okay. And so now you can clearly hear this. Before, you could totally not hear this. I'll even play a really quick sample of what it sounded like before right now. And now this is what it sounds like with our now mixed version. And so you sit here and you methodically go about, what do I want the loudest? What is the most important thing to the listener? This, that, or the other. So maybe it's not the kick. I chose the kick in this case. So you go through, you set your levels up, and then you can do things dynamically throughout the mix. Especially if you've done your own sequencing, you're going to want to do things that incorporate meter and rhythm that will enhance it. And this can be done in the mixing stage. So for example, let's say that on our kick, we want it to gently rise and fall to give emphasis to the first beat so that our listener feels a sense of movement, something they can sort of expect. This is very effective for hats as well. And the ARP, you could just create like these swelling motions with these. Now, I don't like automating these things because they're going to be my global controls. If these things are moving up and down, and if I automate it and then try and move it, it's gonna read the automation and move it back to where it was. So I don't want that because then it's going to be this ridiculous fight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to find my kick, and I'm going to right click its volume. I'm actually going to go to its wrench icon. I'm going to automate this volume. I'm going to right click, go to create automation clip, and call that good. And so here I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to chop it because I want to do the same thing over and over and over. And all I want to do is put a mark right there. And I simply want there to be a dip in the middle. So you see how it's louder at the beginning and not at the end. And I'm dipping because I don't want to go over where I was. This is why you may consider mixing to a smaller value. We're going to hit Control B to duplicate it. And so now we've got this new sense of motion that wasn't there before. You can see we're moving it. But it's not reflected here. So this is a really good thing. So now if I want it, I'm like, oh, that's still pretty loud. And I'm going to judge my loudest point off of where I think that's going to be, which is going to be beat 1. So it looks like I'm pretty solid there. The next thing, let's do the same trick for the hi-hats. There's a lot of tricks. There's so many things you could do. And right now we're still in mono. So we want to identify, do we want to do this for the open hat or the short hat? And so I think I'm going to leave, because it outlines with the clap. So I'm going to leave these two alone, and I'm just going to automate this guy. By the way, you right click to solo like this, and you right click again to unmute everything. Okay, so now instead of automating this, because that's what I just don't want to do that, I'm going to move to short clap. And this is, I believe it's this one. You also generally want to name your, yeah, we're going to name this short hat. We're going to name this kick. And you shift click to rename things. We're going to name this one, what was this? I named it the open hat. And we named this one the clap. But I'm kind of moving a little quick here. So you take your time and make a couple more judgments about this. But we're going to do automate the volume and bring the volume up a little bit. We're going to do a similar thing. We're going to add a point. And maybe this one's going to be a bit different over a couple phrases to add subtle interest to our mix. So we're going to go like this, right? We're going to have 4. And we're going to repeat this 4-bar mix move as opposed to what we had before. So we're going to, whoops, don't want to do that. And we're going to go down, maybe go down a little bit less. Maybe over here, go down and then rise up a little unusual here, you know, something like that. See how it's going? So like, wow, that was really expressive, but it's getting farther away and closer. It's creating this sense of like, oh, there's like some sort of a pulse here. It's an uneven pulse, but it'll be smoothed out by other things that also are following this similar rhythm in our track. So if we unmute this now, solo, unsolo. Now, another great thing you can do is with this lead is musically going to want to go places. It's going to want to have some dynamic range. And if you've written out a synth line like this, it's extraordinarily helpful to do stuff like this. So what you do is you volume automate this. This time I'm automating the actual volume on the channel, but this does not affect the fader. So it's a different color. That's why it's a different color. I try to make a habit of going to this guy though. So I accidentally did not do that, but that's fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this. Now, if we listen, this long note, this just sounds like it wants to get, you know, a little bit louder right there. Like, and this right here sounds like it wants to swell a touch right there. So we're going to make 2 points. And this one I am going to boost a little bit, but not horrendously. And we're going to do something like that. Maybe make this overall. We may just want this volume level to go down at the end of the day. So I'm going to work with what I have, and then I'm going to use my fader to bring it back down. And so to decrescendos right here, that's kind of a cool move. And then bring it back up, maybe plateau a little bit with a small crescendo, and then come back down. And then here, this is a really good opportunity to get loud because there's a movement, right? And so that's really good. And then come down here, decrescendo. And then here is a natural decrescendo or crescendo depending on what you have coming next in your music. So that sounds really nice, and we are going to bring him down just a smidge now. Not too much. Hold control to get smaller values when you're moving stuff. Now on this guy on the sub bass, he's also doing his own thing, and it's a repeating pattern. So I'm just gonna go into the sub bass and edit this. I want this to go do do do. So just get louder every single time. So this is just gonna create that bum 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 bum. So it's gonna be good. Maybe even make this one just a touch louder. And then lastly, we have this ARP, and let's go ahead and give him some love, and or her. I don't know. Maybe it's a female ARP. What do you guys think? Are ARPs male or female? Okay, so we're going to do a similar move to what we did with the kick because it is something that's keeping time in our mix, so it'll make sense to give it a sense of pulse, and I don't want it to be too inconsistent, so we're going to do something like that. And we're working with things that are very, very consistent. When you're other times, you will find, like, especially when working with like tracks from a recording session or something, stems from a recording session, you're gonna find that like the kick drummer, the guy playing the drum set, the kick drummer, the drummer is gonna hit the kick drum or the snare drum or whatever it is unequally as they go. And so sometimes we'll get over how to smooth stuff of that like that out when we get into dynamics. But this same stuff, you're still gonna want to find a spot of optimal positions, and drawing in automating volume like this is like better than compressing like a good 80% of the time, in my opinion. So it gives you controls that a compressor, the way it's about the way that you do it. So we're gonna, when we get to it, we're gonna talk about it, but I highly recommend getting used to being able to quickly automate volume like this. It's so handy, and you can usually get exactly what you want much faster than you could if you're trying to dial in the settings for a compressor. A compressor is used to reduce the dynamic range and offers a couple other things over like the entire track. Or you could automate the compressor on and off. Then that's getting really complicated. Now you're way more complicated than simply just moving a volume knob up and down, which is essentially what a compressor does anyway. So let's go ahead and listen to our now mixed thing. And you see, we pretty much nailed -6. You're not going to see this very often in some of the mixes I'm going to show you because I move up a little bit because I have a lot more than this going on. If we added vocals and stuff, we could make the vocals sit in there right nicely. We could easily create a pocket for them just using volume wise. So this is the most important part, like whether or not your mix jams. Now, right now, everything, remember we have Maximus on. Let's go ahead and reduce that to the original and even turn it off so that it is not part of our chain. And I don't think anything in here is stereo currently, but oh, it's definitely stereo. You hear how it just opened up like hugely. So I definitely have a couple of things. I think it's the drums, but if we listen, now I pick out a couple of things when I do it like this. First, things are really jamming. Our clap has increased in volume in a way I find distracting. So I'm going to bring my clap down some. And I'm going to do this while I'm listening because it's not wise to be touching crap while I'm not listening. And we're good. That's pretty much it. Now, hopefully you picked up some things and you understand a couple of things. This is by far one of the major things I see when people are doing stuff is they might have selected a level that works at one spot in their song. Like, oh, maybe it works great here, but then they didn't mix it to do great over here. They don't have these volume automations. And as a result, their mix is like either lacking momentum and direction or just all sorts of unusual issues. Now, I also, with this sort of a thing, I oftentimes save space instead of automating this like I would. This is great for audio, but when I have my kick available to me like this, I might as well just make the second kick softer, like using this. So I could do something like that, and it would do the exact same thing, and I would not have to see it here. So sometimes people will post their mixes, and they have like freaking a crap ton of automation everywhere, when in reality they could fit almost all of it into like a small little one pattern clip. Which I prefer to do is I just prefer to do that instead of doing this. It depends on what you're doing though, because sometimes it can come back and bite you in your workflow because then you have to undo a bunch of moves because you decided to compress like this. But most of the time I end up doing this because it's just better, faster, easier to look at, and it's easier to navigate, ironically. You think if it's crammed all in there, but you just select your pattern, there it is. You just go to the thing that's the problem, You're like, oh, I want to change this thing right here, and you go ahead and change it. So, see, this is an example. I would have written another automation. We would have had another lane going, and that's just extra work. Something else is it, and this is something you can do in pretty much any DAW. If you have separated your parts out, because I have my stuff running in patterns right now, but let's say that our harmor, well, here's our lead line, and here's our lead line volume, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and just put it over, and now I've saved some space. It's on top. What I can do is, if I want to select the automation, I simply make sure I'm on the automation selector. So now I can change my automation, and then if I go to my audio, I mean not my audio, my MIDI or pattern, I can now manipulate my pattern. But most of the time you're going to be going here for audio, because if you want your pattern, as you see, it still brings it up to the front, and you can double click it, and it will take you to the pattern where you can now manipulate it. So that's something that I really prefer to do in FL. One thing, I do like Pro Tools for mixing, but I like it for mixing other things. Like, I've gotten used to mixing bands in Pro Tools. I am not used to mixing like compositions like this. And a big deal is the plugins that you have and just getting used to the plugin suite that comes with it. But as you see, this is no plugins, just simply mixing. If you found this useful, go ahead, like, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts below. Yeah, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.